Good morning, thanks for clicking on the video. The last time I did an aviary update, I was pondering whether or not I could empty the aviary for the winter, which will save me a lot of money on heating, but also now I've got projects lined up in my mind about maintenance projects and some improvements that I'd like to make. So let me get you caught up on everything that's been going on since the last serious update, or last serious video, I guess I should say. So let's see where to start. Let me start with these guys because the whole thing hinges on the greenback twin spots. There are two pairs in the aviary. This is Peach and Loose, and they have already raised one clutch in the aviary, and then I intended them to be done so I could empty the aviary for the winter. Mind you, it's the middle of December now. So I took away all the nesting material in the nest sites, and then they built this thing mostly out of moss, and then that's bark and whatnot. And I ultimately broke down and gave them some burlap to kind of improve the integrity of the nest. So they were determined to start a second clutch, and I let them, and so that's why they're still in the aviary. And my second pair, this is Julius and Rain. This is Rain, but Julius and Rain is the second pair. And they agreed that they were ready to have another clutch. So they also built a freestanding nest. And they wedged it between a sort of shelving rack and the insulated top of the aviary. And so between the two of them, I am waiting for the chicks to fledge and become independent before they can all move out of the aviary into the bird room. And they are the last birds in the aviary at the moment. Because while this was all going on, Peter and Molly, the parrot finches, also had 3 clutches. And they are now moved out and into the bird room because their babies are all grown up enough to be independent. And then my other twin spot pair, Mr. Big and Nina, fledged out chicks in a flight. Mr. Big is a jerk, so he couldn't be mixed in with the other pairs in the aviary. This is their nest. This is kind of interesting. So this, I've just pulled the twin spot nest. So there's the dome. There's the side entrance. I've talked about that before, but this is a nice view. See how they've made sort of a dummy nest. They've decorated it on top with eggshells and white paper and broccoli and whatnot. So that's the distraction for any predators looking for the babies, is they'll be distracted to the top of the nest and discover that there's nobody home, and then they'll leave them alone. And then the strawberry finches raised a second clutch. And on the same lines, as soon as the babies were not going back into the nest at night to roost, I pulled the nest out and all the nesting material, and I pulled out a lot of the foliage. But of course, it's their biology to want to have a second clutch, and so the poor female laid eggs on the floor, and then I felt bad, and so I threw in this stupid wicker nest and some burlap just so she'd have a place to lay eggs. And I threw the 2 eggs in there, and then, and then they did a great job, and they incubated, and now they have 3 more chicks that are growing up. And then I have their older 3 chicks, and then the 2 original males that I got from Nancy. So they're all together. And then Mr. Big and Nina's 2 chicks have been combined with the first clutch of chicks from the aviary, which were a total of 7. So they're all together. So then in this flight is Tristan and Sven and Ollie, the 2 gold-breasted waxbills, plus the 6 parrot finch chicks, and you can see they're all in different states of molting into their adult plumage. And then in this flight, I have the
8 youngster twin spots that are also molting into their adult plumage. 7 of those 8 are male, and hopefully some of the chicks that are the younger chicks will be female, and then they will make up pairs for the people on my wait list. So that's moving along. And then on top of all of that, I added in the 4 pairs of black-cheeked waxbills. And you might recall they're in quarantine. I think the last time I did a video, and came in pretty rough shape. You can see, for example, this bird's been pretty badly plucked. So I've been working on getting them into better condition and lots of good food, lots of live food. And then there are the 2 pairs of violet-eared waxbills that I kept, and they had to be separated because they were in breeding condition when they arrived. And but luckily they get along as pairs just fine. So that is where all the birds are at, kind of in the last couple of weeks. Okay, so now you're all caught up. Where are we now? Well, the twin spot youngsters are just starting to get their spots. It will still be several months before I know the sexes for sure. So they're just hanging out, growing up, learning how to eat new foods, learning how to eat out of a bird feeder and different kinds of dishes and things. Just basically hanging out, being youngsters. They're starting to sing a little bit, that sort of thing. The parrot finch babies are doing the same thing. They're taking their cues from the twin spots and Tristan, particularly about eating live foods. They are not in with Peter and Molly because sometimes Peter doesn't like the babies to stay around. And they get their their adult plumage in about 4 months. So a couple of them from the first clutch are already almost fully colored up. And then the last 2 clutches are sort of on their way. Peter and Molly are on a diet. Parrot finches can overeat, particularly when they're feeding chicks, and they're great parents and they eat well, but they get a little pudgy. So they'll be molting soon, so they're in a flight by themselves. And this pair I had kept out for myself for future breeding purposes, but there's an experienced breeder that would really like to work with this species, and so I decided to let them go to that person. And they will be they are both F1 generation, and the female was hatched in October of last year, so this spring they will be ready to go. I'm very excited to see if they are successful. Okay, so back to the imported guys. One of the sort of natural byproducts of splitting them up into pairs and all of the high quality food and live food to help them sort of rebuild their strength after their travels and quarantine and the various treatments they had as part of the import process, is that they sort of start playing house, is what I'm going to call it. Now, they are in breeding conditions, so that means that it's possible that they're serious about it, but it's also possible they're just going through the motions. So as I'm doing these experiments with what live food that they're willing to take and what kind of nest sites do they like and what nesting material do they like, just trying to learn about the species. It's not unusual that they start to think, oh, well, let's just build a nest or whatever. And so, in fact, that's what's been happening. And in the last couple of weeks, I've actually split up the black cheeks into pairs because I got the information about what their parentage is, and I now know who's related to who from the breeder in Belgium, very kindly. And it was fun to, I would catch one, move it to a flight, and then I would listen to them ping back and forth. They have calls back and forth to figure out who wanted to be with who. And I was able to match them up actually really nicely. So hopefully you can see they're looking a little bit better than when they first arrived, if you saw that video. And here's just a time lapse of them playing around in this nest. And I'll show you what it looked like by the end of the day. They've already filled up this little canary basket inside of my reed ball that I use for the twin spots. They seem to like it well enough. The one difference with the black-cheeked waxbills is they build a dome, just like the twin spots, but they also build an entry tube that slopes downward toward the ground. It's quite elaborate, and then often they have a roosting nest that they build as well, which is more elaborate than the twin spots, just piling broccoli on top. So really, really fun to see how they work. Not like a weaver. It's not that proficient, but it's pretty neat. So this is what it looks like by the end of the day. I'm not even sure, honestly, what I'm looking at. But off to the right, you can see that dark hole. That's going to be the entry tube, ultimately, as it turns out. I didn't really realize it at the time. And now this is the next day, and you can see that dark hole that looks like the entrance to the nest. It's not the entrance. It's a fake nest that's built on top of the dome. And the actual entrance is pointing right at the ground, right at the bottom of the screen there. Ingenious. The reason I keep getting these guys right after a bath is it's the only time they'll sit still. So you can get a look at what they actually look like. They're just absolutely stunningly gorgeous little birds. And super friendly, great temperament, great personality. Love them, love them, love them. So that's pair number 1. They don't have any names yet. And this is pair number 2. This is the oldest female. She was hatched in July of 2020, paired up with the male that she liked. And here's a little time lapse of them working on their nest. In this case, they didn't create that downward sloping tunnel entrance, so this is more like a twin spot nest, but boy, it is chock full of stuff. Well, so was the other one, to be honest. I don't know if you can see what's happening, but like one keeps putting a string in and the other one keeps taking it back out again. So, oh my gosh, they make me laugh. Okay, now here's something interesting. So the entrance to the nest is up high. That's where this bird is going to go. That's where the tunnel is that leads to the nest chamber, as best I can tell. So you know what? It's not until I'm editing this video that I'm starting to wonder what the heck I'm seeing. So watch this next. I just left the camera running, basically tucked into the side of the cage. That's a different spot. What is going on? I think I fell for it. I think that entrance at the top is the dummy because it's the more obvious entry. I think the actual nest chamber is that lower entrance. Maybe, or tube, entrance tube, I should say. I have no idea. I don't know what's going on. Anyway, that's the second pair that I made up. Still don't have names. And this is the third pair. This is their courtship. What lucky timing to catch that, huh? I wish the twin spots weren't singing in the background. You could hear them a little bit better in terms of their song, but maybe I'll get lucky and catch that at another time. Now for these guys, I gave them a half-open nest box to play around with, and there's no room to build a dummy nest on top, so what's interesting is they built it off to the side. So on the right, there's a little dome fake canary basket kind of looking nest, and then there's a tubular entrance that wraps around it from the left, and then there's a nest chamber behind it. I can barely get the borescope in there to look in there, but that's what I can see is happening. So that's pair number 3, and the female of that pair is the one that was plucked completely bald. So she's looking a lot better now. That's the male, and there's the female. And the last 2 birds are not really a pair, but they're both very young. They're the youngest 2 of the whole group. So they're most definitely being discouraged from exploring nesting opportunities and things like that. That would be a bad idea at this age. Now I know this might be a little bit hard to see. This is the pair of violet ears that I sent down to Atlanta, and I happened to catch them in their courtship routine, so I thought I would include that. This is why they went down to Atlanta, because they were the most well-established pair, and I figured they would be a good fit for an experienced breeder. But right next door to the black cheeked that I just showed is one of the pairs of violet ears that I kept. And this is them kind of trying to go through the same thing. Not very successfully, I might add. Keep in mind, these guys are all jacked up on live food. So again, they're more playing house than anything else. The other two looked fairly serious about what they were up to. But anyway, they have a half-open nest box that they can experiment with if they so desire. And just to wrap up the status of the birds in the bird room, these are the 3 older strawberry chicks, just starting to get some color. It takes them a while. They're pushing 4 months, could be 6 months before I know for sure what sexes, but I think these 3 are all males. You can start to see some of the color coming in on this one. All right, so after all of that, do you even remember where this whole thing started? It was in the aviary with the twin spot pairs waiting for their chicks to fledge. And guess what? Now that I got you all caught up, the rest of the video is real time, because you know, in the mornings with my coffee, I like to sit in and watch my birds. So here is what I saw 3 days ago in the aviary. And then 2 days ago in the aviary, this is what I saw. You may be wondering when there's multiple clutches of the same species in the aviary. As far as I know, the parents know where their chicks are all the time, and they know which chicks are their own. I have seen chicks unsuccessfully beg to adult twin spots that are not their parents, but the parents know who to feed. And yesterday, this little one showed up, and this is a Peach and Loose baby, a little bit younger, as you can see. And there's Peach. Daddy is checking on the baby. Here's a case in point. That is one of Julius and Rain's babies that's trying to beg from Peach. And then here comes Loose, the mom, and she's like, yeah, no, you're not one of mine. So now I know there's at least 5, although I heard multiple chicks in Peach and Loose's nest, so I don't know how many there are. Later in the day, I try to kind of get a count, but there's chicks everywhere. I don't know. Maybe you can tell.
One, two, three, 4, 5, 6. Holy crap, how many are there? One, two, three, 4, 5, 6, 7. No, that's a mom. There's 3 over there. That's dad.
Also, I wanted to thank the viewers who watched my last video. That was hard for me to do. It's hard to put yourself out there like that, and I appreciate the kind words. Unfortunately, due to a technicality, I did not win my bottle of coffee because I failed to consider the thumbs down factor, which I was told zeroes out the 3 you made me laugh votes. So it looks like I will not be quitting my day job and becoming a comedian, but I appreciate everyone trying to help. Thanks for watching.